Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Stefan and today it is time for an economy guide. This has been in the works for quite some time. I have been busy working up all the numbers and theorizing some strategies. All the strategies that I'll be talking about in this video and this upcoming video series are those that I tested myself and those that I've seen work against Grand Admiral, no scaling AI. And so let's begin with some of the starting issues, the early game economy. Early game economy is pretty much nothing like the endgame economy. While the endgame economy revolves around just managing what you already have, early game economy is about acquiring what you will have in the future. Getting good setup is extremely important in this game because snowballing is a very real factor. If you get a slight advantage in the early game, that will amount to significant advantage in the long run, and so getting anything that is good for the short term is actually also very good for the long term as well. And so let's begin with the ultimate Stellaris economy guide. The early game. Your early game economic well-being will depend on two factors. One is your starting empire, and two is your surrounding territory and how you choose to utilize it. I have made some videos on early game empire creation, and I will link those in the top right corner. Without getting into the very fine details of this whole process, what you basically need to know is that there are three factors that mainly affect your empire. Those are your ethics, civics, and traits. Traits have the most direct economic benefits or detriments to your empire. Most of them grant flat-out bonuses to economic production, and generally you will want to spend some points on more powerful traits to help your economy along, while also picking malices for your species that don't really affect it too much. For example, for malice, this species is running decadent. Decadent reduces worker and slave happiness, but since we're also running with syncretic evolution, with a syncretic species under our main species, this doesn't really matter too much because this is going to be the higher class, and we have another class to do all the other stuff. Of course, syncretics are not something that you generally have to deal with. They are granted by a very specific civic called syncretic evolution. There are many different civics in this game, and in fact I've created a nice little civics tier list to help you along with determining the power of those, but generally civics as a whole have very powerful and diverse effects that will impact your economy in one way or another. If you are running certain powerful civics, such as technocracy or syncretic evolution, you will have to balance your ethics and authority around it. Civics are arguably the most important part of this governance and ethics setup, and so ethics or authority are only second priority. Of course, in the current meta, there are some ethics that are more powerful than others. For example, going for fanatic materialist is one of the absolute best things that you can do. As of 2.2 and going well into 2.3, robots are extremely powerful and are a free source of pops. Now, I will get to why pops are important later, but all you need to know for now is that pops are amazing, and restricting your access to those pops is a bad idea. With this one exception, you will be able to tell the general benefit from the ethics screen by just reading the tooltips. If you've enjoyed the game for long enough to purchase DLC, you will of course notice that there are new authorities that pop up with the different DLCs that you purchase. There are three special types of authorities, and all of them have a certain unique set of civics. All of these add significant new mechanics to this game that I will not be able to get to in this video, but as a rule of thumb, they completely change the way you play your economy. If you are new to the game and are struggling with getting economic practice in, I highly recommend going for machine intelligence or hive minds. These can be either purchased, or you can go into multiplayer with someone who has these and get to try them out without having to actually buy them. Joining a Discord such as the Weekend Stellaris Club or my very own Grand Flotilla are very good ways to get your hands on hive minds or machine empires without actually having to pay for it. And while I'm on the topic of different authorities, pro tip, machine intelligences in 2.3 are OP, so get to play with them if you can. But anyways, let's get back to our normal civics and ethics set, and let's play with this empire. Let's not play with these game-breaking S-tier civics, and instead let's go for something a little more boring so that it doesn't really affect the balance of the game that much. Before delving in deep into economy management, there is one thing that I do have to mention about empire setup, and that is the fact that it affects the number of your starting pops. Pops are an extremely important resource, and so getting them in any way possible is a very good idea. And one way you can do that is by choosing certain authorities and civics. Without any special authorities and civics, you get 24 pops right off the bat. However, if you instead go for a mechanist as a civic, you will be able to get 3 additional pops, raising your total to 27. Granted, these are not just 3 free pops. You do get 8 robots, which are somewhat less capable than your main species, but there is a way to get just 4 additional pops. To get 28 pops, all you have to do is choose a megacorp. And the best part about megacorp is that you can actually reform to a normal government later on in the game. there is a period of time of about 20 years where you cannot actually reform your government, but after that 20 years, you can reform it. As a megacorp, you will of course also gain additional energy credits right off the bat, and so starting as a megacorp is a very good way to start off the game and gain a slight advantage over everyone. Remember, a small advantage in the early game is a significant advantage in the late game. Of course, you can also go for a slightly different route and get 32 pops right off the bat, but that requires you play a hive mind, and hive minds are significantly different in playstyle from normal empires. Basically, you don't have to deal with consumer goods or pesky factions. But of course, you also don't get the advantages of dealing with consumer goods and factions. Some aspects of the empire, such as research, are a bit less efficient, but at the same time, you do get a simpler playstyle. But to really drive the point home with your initial population, all you have to do is play as a rogue servitor machine empire. You get a whopping 39 pops right off the bat, and building slots are a complete non-issue for this empire type. This is, by the way, my favorite empire type in the game, and there is an ongoing series on this channel covering rogue servitors that I will be continuing in the next couple of days. But anyways, that covers the early game economic aspect as it regards to empire setup, and now we can get to the more interesting features, the initial game setup. This will be done with a completely normal organic empire, and let's get right to it. So one thing you will notice is that you will start in a specific spot in the galaxy. From this position, you will notice that there are multiple ways you can go to expand. As a general rule of thumb, you want as little choke points as possible, and so in this certain cluster, I would go for 3 choke points right here, and right here, possibly expanding further if it is worth it. If it is not, I would just contain myself to this little cluster, and then just build up my economy here. Generally, it is way more efficient to run and manage a territorially small empire versus a large empire. While the intuitive answer to growth would be just to expand as much as possible, it is not actually the best strategy to go for. If you cannot exploit your territory, there is no reason to control it. And so having a large swath of territory with no actual mining stations built is way more inefficient than having a small empire with it completely exploited and carefully managed. This is a rule that will apply well into the late game, because as you get more planets, managing them all is going to be way more difficult. It is way easier to manage 10 planets than it is to manage 20, and in fact, my general cutoff is 20 planets. At over 20 planets, I generally spend a lot more time than necessary micromanaging my planets, and it's not even as good of a job. And so I generally recommend going for up to 20 planets, or as many as you feel comfortable with. But anyways, that's more of a tip for the late game. Let's get back to the topic at hand, the early game and your initial setup. With this territorial expansion in mind, you will have to send out your science ship. Go ahead and claim the territory that you want. This is very much an economic decision because expansion costs influence and resources, and unexpected wars are generally very inefficient and are bad for your economy. In this situation, for example, I would go ahead and try to secure this choke point first and foremost. If you are less concerned about enemy empires trying to attack you, you may just want to go ahead and go for a colony rush. And that is just going ahead and exploring systems until you get a planet, and then going ahead and serving that planet and putting a colony ship on it as soon as possible. Both of these strategies have your merits, and you have to make the decision on what to go for right off the bat. In this particular situation though, on high difficulty AI and with many choke points to cover, I will go ahead and prioritize this choke point first and foremost. With expansion out of the way, let's talk about your fleet. With the exception of a special event where a fleet spawns in your home system that you have to defeat, your fleet will generally be on standby for the first 10 years of the game. In order to minimize the upkeep that you have to do for this fleet, and also to gain more resources off of it, you will just want to go ahead and strip these ships down for resources. What you can do is go into Ship Designer, choose your corvettes, remove all the guns and attachments, and also turn off the hyperdrive. Save the design by turning off auto-generate designs, and then upgrade your fleet. This useless initial fleet will net you a grand total of 145 alloys, and upgrading it back to normal will only cost you around 160. Paying 15 extra alloys later on is not a big issue, especially since you also cut down on the upkeep of your corvettes. So let's go ahead, upgrade this. This will only take a grand total of 3 days.
Fleet enhancements.
And now we have ships that are less powerful, take less to upkeep, and most importantly, add to the treasury. With these starting resources, there are many things that you can do. For example, one thing you can do is go ahead and put a station somewhere in your home system. Another thing that you can do is go ahead and build a new science ship. Science ships are extremely useful in the early game because they allow you to scout the area and make the most informed and profitable decisions. Therefore, we will go for a science ship, sell some of these excess alloys, and recruit a new scientist. The leader system is a can of worms that I will not be covering in this video, but for now we'll just recruit a scientist and put him on a science ship as soon as possible. One more thing that you can do right off the bat with the resources that you do have is sell a lot of it and get enough to build a building. So in this situation, we will sell a bit of our alloys, consumer goods, and food, get 400 minerals. With that, we'll be able to purchase either a science lab if we're going for a tech rush, or an alloy foundry if we're going for a fleet rush. And going for anything in between is generally wasteful because you do want to get the most use out of your building slots. In this case, we'll go ahead and choose research labs because research is just so amazing. Also, putting up a single research labs building will boost our research by about 50%, and so that will net us a significant advantage over anyone else in this galaxy. Yet another thing that you can do is to boost your initial planet even further. You will notice that you have an enforcer pop on your home planet. An enforcer pop that is generally not too necessary. Crime issues start to appear around 30%, and if you just want an extra pop, you can go ahead and employ him, and once this new building comes online, he will have a job. By unemploying the enforcer, you will also get access to a very nice decision on your home planet. If we wait just a single month, you will see that our crime on the home planet updates. Now it is 24%, and we need a minimum of 10% to initiate the negotiate with crime lords decision. This will have an effect of boosting crime by 50%, but keep in mind that this is the crime that you already have. If you have 0% crime initially, you will still have 0% crime even with a crime lord deal. What you can potentially just do is go ahead and employ your enforcer back, and he will simply fix all the crime problems on your home planet. As a result of this little manipulation, you get an additional 10% to stability and an immunity to any negative events that are associated with crime. Normally you can get things like gang wars happening on your planet with high crime, but with the crime lord deal, all you have is the potential of a criminal underworld, where you can potentially lose up to 4 pops to crime. But at the point where you are at 100% crime, it's generally going to be the late game, and at that point you will be wasting 4 pops anyway for enforcers, so it really just evens out. Do keep in mind though that doing a crime lord deal does cost 25 influence, and so doing this right off the bat where you do need the influence to expand may be an unwise decision. But do initiate the crime lord deal as soon as you get the chance. Yet another thing that we can do with early game setup is to go ahead and choose certain policies. You will see that we have quite the list of policies, but really the only ones that concern our economy are these 3: food policy, economic policy, and trade policy. As far as food policy goes, if you have any extra food production, I generally recommend switching to nutritional plentitude. It only increases your food upkeep by 25% while giving plus 10% to pop growth, as well as an additional little bit to pop happiness. It is very easy to produce extra food, and so going for nutritional plentitude right off the bat is generally a good idea. If you are really min-maxing though, it is generally a good idea to wait until you have 200 food to actually do this, so that you have enough for a colony ship without having to resort to buying food. As far as your economic policy goes, it is generally the best idea to keep it to a mixed economy, at least right away. Both alloys and consumer goods are very important in the early game, and unless you're going for an all-out rush build, keeping to a mixed economy is generally the best idea. As far as trade policy goes, you do have a choice. As of 2.3.3, Marketplace of Ideas has actually become viable, and so now you have a choice of 3 things. Either you go for full energy production, which is generally the best idea from the beginning of the game, consumer benefits, which is generally a good idea from 10 years onwards, or Marketplace of Ideas, which is completely different because it gives unity for your trade value and can be potentially very good. With Marketplace of Ideas, you're either converting consumer goods to unity with a 1-to-1 ratio, or energy to unity with a 2-to-1 ratio. Either way, it is a very good rate, and if you have trade value to spare, I do suggest going for Marketplace of Ideas. The other policies are whatever and are not going to consume your economy, at least for the time being. Some that you might want to focus on are your initial border status. I generally like keeping it close so that others don't sneak through your territory, and slavery, which I generally set to prohibited unless I'm actively running slaves. You can allow slavery later on in the game if you do get any slaves, but in the early game, allowing slavery will only harm you. There are many empires that have slavery turned off that will have an opinion malice with you, and also you'll have a chance of governors actually getting the Iron Fisted trait, which increases slave production by 10%, completely useless if you don't have any slaves. And so, this about does it. Research is a completely separate mechanic that I will cover later, so this whole screen will not be touched for now, but do keep in mind that going for a good economy does mean going for good research, and research is only good if you choose the right options. That will be covered later. There's simply no time for it today. As a reminder, if you are new to the game and this is the first video you watched, please do check out all the different tooltips, especially regarding to your planets. It will talk about all the different districts, buildings, populations, whatever in the next video, and if you do know it, well, good for you. I hope to see you in the next video where I cover some strategies relating to jobs, buildings, districts, etc., etc. All these different values over here will get a thorough explanation and some tips to help you along. But anyways, this has been it. Thanks everyone for watching. Special thanks to my patrons. Leave a like if you enjoyed this economy guide, and stay tuned for more. Thanks, and bye bye.